Energy needs are growing.
The world's climate is changing.
Two massive challenges
the Energy Institute and its members are working on.
The cheapest, cleanest energy is the energy that we don't use. The training and chartered status provided by the Energy Institute give energy management professionals and the businesses they work for the edge.
Oil and gas continue to meet the majority of the world's energy needs. Collaboration led by the Energy Institute provides vital good practice that protects people, equipment and the environment during production.
The world is shrinking thanks to progress in global air and surface transport. Fuel equipment specifications developed by the Energy Institute help ensure the safety of passengers on more than 100,000 flights globally every day.
With global action to tackle climate change, major advances in low-carbon energy sources are unfolding before our eyes. The Energy Institute is part of that transition, helping to ensure safety for those working on offshore wind farms.
Affordable solar energy is opening up access to energy for populations around the world. The Energy Institute champions those at the forefront of this important work, giving them the recognition and confidence to go on to even greater things.
Energy storage is the linchpin of the low-carbon energy system, stepping in to meet demand when renewables like wind and solar aren't available. Energy Institute membership opens the door for young professionals early in their careers in this and other emerging fields.
The pace of technological innovation in energy is extremely fast today. Through its events program and digital resources, the Energy Institute is a vibrant network sharing inspirational ideas and knowledge about our energy future.
The Energy Institute,
bringing global energy
expertise together.
The world's energy.
So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce Dr. Adlan to provide a brief overview of the Energy Institute in Malaysia.
Hello. Okay, thank you, Alan. And welcome to everyone, especially to our first Malaysia Branch event. I'm Shah Abdul Rahman, Associate Professor at Interim University, Malaysia. And I've been involved in energy research, particularly renewable energy, for almost 20 years now. Now, I only have two slides just to introduce the EI Malaysia Society and to give a bit of background to what EI is in Malaysia. The Malaysia Branch was initially started towards the end of 2010 to serve the members residing in this region and to support EI growth. The society was formally registered with the Registry of Societies Malaysia in 2012 to comply with the local regulations regarding public gatherings at the time. So as you can see on the slides, our roles can be listed as to organize or host event activities, to support EI representatives, and especially catering to members' requests, and also to help expand the EI network in the region. Now on the left-hand side, you can see some pictures there. I put up some pictures of previous activities. We've been conducting expert speaker talks, and one day technical workshops. And the picture at the bottom shows our last biogas workshop where we had a good mix of attendees from industry and also government agencies. And then there's several photos of site visits. We've been to the Port Dickson 1.5 gigawatt natural gas power plant. Among others, we've been to the Energy Commission headquarters building, and also a biofuel pilot processing plants. So these are sort of technical sites that really relate to energy within Malaysia. The last point I want to share in this slide is the learning affiliates. We have 5 learning affiliates in Malaysia at the moment. And these are academic institutions that are registered with the EI, and they will receive a lot of benefits. Amongst others, all the students within that program can be registered for free as a student member. So you can actually check the EI website if you want to know more about learning affiliates. And allow me a shameless plug here. What University is actually the only university in Malaysia now that has MSc programs and petroleum engineering degree program to be accredited by the EI. Next slide, please. So here in Malaysia, we have over 350 members of the EI. And if you look at the heat map in the middle, they are quite spread out throughout the country, with concentrations in Peninsula Malaysia in the industrialized area, Klang Valley, Ipoh and Kuantan, and East Malaysia is more in Kuching, Miri and Kota Kinabalu. Now, from these numbers, we have about 14% of them with professional registration. And as you can see, the breakdown in the graph at the bottom, we offer chartership not only in engineering, and also anyone from an engineering background can still apply to be a chartered energy manager, chartered environmentalist, or even a chartered scientist. So we have a few of those as well. The next slide, please. So this chart is taken from the last branch meeting. And we just to show you that there's a lot of diverse backgrounds within Malaysia itself. I'm not going to go into each and every one of them. But as you can see, we have people from engineering, agriculture, even health and safety, HR, all the way to renewables, even education and training. So we really have a very diverse background of members in Malaysia. So it's actually a good platform if you are in the business in the energy and looking to network. We pretty much have covered all the grounds here. Okay, that's all I have to share with you. And I will answer any questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you again for having me, and I'll pass the session back to you, Alan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adlan. I do understand that there's some technical issues with the audio, so big apologies for that. Hopefully you'll stay with us for the presentation by Mr. Andy Bell on professional membership and registration. Over to you, Andy.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope the sound is a bit loud and clear now. Thank you for welcoming me to speak to you today. Let me know if there's too much echo. I'm not quite sure what's happening with our sound system this afternoon. Still got echo, is there? Quite sure why that is. Let me say a few more words and tell me if you can hear what I am saying. I started in the engineering industry over 40 years ago. I've been a chartered engineer for over 30 years. Worked in the railway industry, specifically in air brake systems, absorbing energy, and then in platform screen doors for energy saving devices. Alan, I think we need to reconnect. We seem to have very serious audio problems.
Just bear with me. Candy, do you want to try that?
How's my voice now? Has it still got echo? Is that a better sound quality now?
It's better.
Okay, excellent. Maybe we found the issue. Sorry about that, but it's a new system that the Energy Institute have just put online through WebEx. And it worked perfectly, of course, when we did a trial last week, but naturally when you try these things in real life, Murphy's Law comes along, as all we engineers are very experienced with, and spoils it. So as I was saying, I've been an engineer for a long time, so I have a great deal of experience of Murphy's Law and the disasters that can happen on site. I've worked in energy. More recently, I set up an energy management program for my company's factories in Asia and carried out energy auditing for them both throughout Asia and Australia, and also for some of our companies in the UK and in Europe. I worked on the platform screen doors, which are energy saving devices on the KL LRT2 system underneath KL City. But now I live in Singapore and I'm the membership secretary for the local EI branch, having been involved in also in the EI Hong Kong branch for many years when I lived there. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to introduce to you professional membership and registration through the Energy Institute. Next slide, please. So why is the EI special? Well, to me, it's special because it's a worldwide professional institute, and it's all about bringing together everyone who is professionally interested in energy, not just us engineers, but also environmentalists, academics, businessmen, investors, and lawyers, people from any walk of life, and all of these people are important to make a successful project. Next slide, please. Engineers love figures. These are some very interesting ones from the EI home website. So why is energy important? Well, first of all, we've already seen that without energy, this webinar couldn't take place. And in fact, energy is all around us. It's a significant portion of everything we do and are involved with, and will continue to be a major factor in any profession, job, project, product we may become involved with. Energy is everywhere. We don't just use it, but it's embodied in all the products that we use. Next slide, please. So let's now talk about the membership grades. Let's go on to the next slide where we talk about the pre-professional grades of membership. And for all of these 3 grades, you can join online via the EI website. There's no assessment of your qualifications or experience, and you'll get immediate access to all the benefits, services, and resources. Associate members in Malaysia and Singapore can enjoy a 50% discount off the joining fee, and that enables them to use the AMEI designatory title after their name. If your organisation is a company member of the EI, you're entitled to 50% off the joining fee. There will be a special discount code, so speak to your company member rep or contact the EI for more information. Student membership can be free for those who are studying at one of the EI's learning affiliate universities. So you'll need to find out from your EI rep or your local EI branch whether your university is affiliated with EI. If you're ready to apply for professional membership, it's mandatory to be registered in one of the pre-professional memberships first before upgrading. Next slide, please. Here we can see on this next slide, comes up, there we go. These are the professional membership grades. Now these you can't qualify for online. You need to put together a written application, which is formally assessed by the EI's membership panel. For technician member and full member, you'll need to have around 4 to 5 years of experience in energy. But it's not all about time served, it's more about demonstration of competence, so it might take you longer. If you're in a particularly high-powered job, it might be a little bit less. However, for fellow, you'll need around 7 to 8 experience at least, with at least 5 years at a senior level or a position of very senior responsibility. There's no educational requirement to apply for one of these grades. It's based on your professional experience in energy. Next slide, please. So the most common route to professional membership and registration is as shown above. You become a student member whilst you're studying. Once you get your first job, you upgrade to associate member. And then you upgrade to professional membership once you have a solid amount of experience in energy. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our EI professional grades in orange. And in the center box in blue, we can see the professional registrations which are licensed. I emphasize the word licensed under the Engineering Council and the Society for the Environment, which can be awarded through the EI. So it's not the EI awarding CEng, it's the Engineering Council, or in the environmentalist category, it's the Society for the Environment. However, in green, you can see our EI exclusive titles. I emphasize the word exclusive. You can only achieve Chartered Energy Engineer, Chartered Petroleum Engineer, and Chartered Energy Manager through registration with the EI. No other professional body can offer them. You can apply for one of the EI's professional grades on its own, i.e. member. This is a form of professional recognition, and you have to go through the full assessment process to get it. But you cannot apply for anything in blue or green without also applying for one of our grades unless you are already an MEI or FEI. Chartered Energy Engineer and Chartered Petroleum Engineer must be applied for together with CEng. In other words, through the Engineering Council. And if you're not sure, speak to myself or Alan or one of the EI membership team in Home Council back in London if you're still unsure about which one's right for you. But let me just emphasize from my own experience, CEng is not easier to get through the Energy Institute than, say, IMechE or IET or any of the other professional institutes. Some people think that. Some people try to join the Energy Institute and get their CEng because they think it's going to be easier through the Energy Institute. But I think you can see from this slide, it makes no difference at all. It's the Engineering Council and the Society for the Environment who award these professional titles. And the criteria is exactly the same whether you apply through the Energy Institute, the IMechE, the IET, the Civils, or any of the other engineering institutions. Next slide, please. So let's talk now about the benefits of professional recognition. Next slide, please. Having a professional title such as Chartered status does enhance your employability. It shows you have all the attributes employers are looking for, and it can give you an edge over others. So it may give you a foot in the door to that interview, or it may swing your, help you to get a job over various competitors who are trying to get the same job. That's because it's an external validation, and it shows that you've received some kind of approval from senior figures in the energy industry who have decided you are an expert in your field and a competent energy professional. So it's not just some reference from a friend, it's an independent reference, if you like. Next slide, please. You'll be gaining professional titles that set you apart in the energy sector and in the engineering world. And the point is they're recognized worldwide. So local recognitions are good, without a doubt. Getting a recognition in Singapore or in Malaysia, a local recognition, they can be very, very good for your job and may be necessary for your work locally. Once you go to international conferences, or you want to go for an international job, or you work on an international project, then it may well be that titles such as CEng are much more widely recognised and understood, and may get you that little advantage that others, colleagues, may not have. And it also demonstrates your professionalism and commitment to best practice in your field of energy. Next slide, please. I've said it before, but remember that Chartered Energy Engineer, Chartered Petroleum Engineer, and Chartered Energy Manager are unique titles. You can't get them anywhere else, and it does make you special. You're getting formal professional recognition that you couldn't get anywhere else. Certainly, my having Chartered Energy Manager myself, having that title, helped me in my former company getting recognition and being able to start up and run an energy management program. So the EI has individual members, company members, partners, international branches, as we've heard already in Malaysia, Singapore, and in Hong Kong, but also in Ireland, Africa, Caribbean, Middle East. And the EI covers all sectors of energy and all disciplines in energy. Next slide, please. The application process. Next slide. I'm not going to go through in great detail how you apply, except to say you need to emphasize, you need to look at step 1 and step 2. Download a very comprehensive application pack from the Energy Institute. And number 2, read the guidance notes. They are very well written, very well set out, and very self-explanatory. So read those, download them, and read them. Next slide, please. I'll talk about a few of the steps that you have to go through to fill in the full application. Application form, that's the basic one. That's your name, rank, and number. But what I want to talk about in particular is sponsors. You need to have 2 sponsors, and they will be very helpful to you because they will be people who have been through this kind of application before, and they'll be able to give you the benefit of their experience, as well as being more senior to you in your profession, and will be able to help you with your application forms. So both sponsors have to fill out their own sponsor reference form, and they'll provide some comments about you on that form. So they have to have known you for some time. They don't need to be EI members, but for CEng applications, at least one sponsor must be currently registered as a CEng. Now, your professional development review is an overview of your energy career up to the present, but it's not a CV. It's not meant to be 10 pages long and a long curriculum vitae. You're not trying to get a job. What it should do is give you an insight into your relevant roles and your main achievements in energy. CPD record is very important, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. You need to include an organisation chart, and what I'd like to emphasise here is, particularly for young engineers, you need to show that you've got people who report to you in some way, shape or form. And it maybe they directly report to you. That's very helpful, and you have to manage them, and you have to do their annual assessments and so on. But it maybe you don't have that opportunity, because if you're a young engineer and you're working in an organisation which has a matrix style organisation, that may not be so easy, but you probably work in a project team or an installation team or a commissioning team or a consultancy team, and you have people who are reporting to you in a project. And it may be that you can use that, because you may have to coach them, you may have to train them, you may have to send them on training courses, you may have to help them develop, because you need them to do certain tasks in your project, and that can all be relevant as well. and the competence grid, and that is also very important, and we'll have a look at that on a slide later on. Next slide, please. I mentioned CPD. This is quite important. It's very important, and you need to be doing continual professional development all through your working life. So Alan, myself, Adlan, we're all continuing to do CPD. What does CPD mean? How do you record it? Well, CPD is almost everything you do. For example, my giving this webinar this afternoon, I will record this on my CPD chart as some coaching and some support for young engineers. That's one type of CPD. Work-based learning can be another type. Something you've learned from the project that you're managing in your workplace. Professional activity, being part of a branch or a YPN, being on the committee, mentoring somebody, perhaps training some of your young engineers who are in your team, helping organise events, perhaps could be. Education, of course, going on training courses yourself, doing formal education or doing training courses for the EI that the EI have set up, say, or any other professional organisation. Doesn't just have to be technical, could be management, could be financial, could be some contract legal training, for example. Self-directed learning is also allowed, reading journals, teaching yourself, watching YouTubes, watching webinars, reading magazines, all sorts of ways you can learn. One of the best books I could point you towards is called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air by David Mackay. It's a very, very well written book, and reading a book like that would also count as CPD. You need to record your CPD, and you can do that either on your own Excel spreadsheet, or if you go onto the EI website, you can find a very structured methodology for recording CPD on a tab called My Career Path. Next slide, please. So the competencies. In your professional development report, the competency grid, you'll have to show that you have covered these 5 sections, showing that you are competent in all those 5 boxes. So I said that your professional development report's not a CV. What you'll have to do for each area that you've recorded in your professional development report, you'll find that it applies to one of these 5 boxes. For example, you might have talked about managing a project, and D, communication, interpersonal skills. You'll be able to talk in there about running meetings, chairing meetings, giving presentations, doing a marketing sales presentation, doing a presentation to senior management, and so on. You'll find that everything you've done ties back to these competencies, and that's what you'll have to show. Next slide, please. The assessment process. The assessment process. There are 6 application deadlines per year, so roughly one every 2 months. When your papers first arrive in London, they'll be reviewed by the EI membership team to make sure that you've completed everything correctly. They will also have a look at your academic qualifications, and if you have done one of the accredited degrees, which we'll mention later on, then you get through very quickly and very easily. But if you have been to a different university, then they will ask for more details about your academic qualifications, You may have to give your curriculum, and you may have to say what particular modules you took and show that it is of an equivalent standard to an accredited course. This is not the EI being difficult. This is making sure that they comply with the Engineering Council's requirements. So they're actually being helpful. There'll then be a second review by 2 assessors who sit on the membership panel. These are all volunteers, but they're often very senior energy professionals, and they'll look through your application and they make comments about it. And it may be that they think you're not quite, or you haven't quite explained yourself correctly or suitably in your application, and they'll make some comments, and the membership team will then write back to you and say, would you like to clarify this? You explain this further, or you're missing this section, and they'll give you an opportunity to add some additional information. It'll then be reviewed again, and if everything's fine, then the reviewers will pass it on to the interviewers. Now, the interviewers are likely to be in your local branch, and the interview will be carried out either face-to-face or, at the moment, perhaps virtually. That is possible. It is possible to do that. And the reviewers will suggest to the interviewers, the local interviewers, that they explore certain areas of your application and your career in more detail, where perhaps you haven't explained yourself thoroughly. And this gives you the opportunity face-to-face or virtually to explain in more detail. You'll not need to do a presentation at the interview or a test. It's not a test, it's not an examination. It's a general discussion which lasts around about 40 minutes to 1 hour. And the interview will cover the competence criteria we spoke about in the application. And they'll be making sure that you have covered every single competence out of those 5 categories. So to summarise, the purpose of the interview is to ensure that your roles and responsibilities allow you to demonstrate a full range of competencies required for that grade of member. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, if you're a young engineer, I recommend that you do an interim registration first. And this really gives you the chance to put forward your qualifications that you have to date. It gets checked by the EI membership team, and they'll tell you what's missing. So you don't have to do a full application later only to discover that you've got certain things are not what you were hoping for. So it gets the first part of your application out of the way, the educational aspect, and it makes sure that you've got all the necessary ticks in the box that the Engineering Council require. And you can do this simply by downloading the application form from the EI website, complete it and email it to the professional membership team, who will deal with it for you. And I would just like to add, I think it's quite a good idea for anyone who studied at an overseas university, which may or may not be accredited by the EI or the Engineering Council. I have assisted a number of engineers from this part of the world who have submitted their application and helped them with getting their answering the questions in a suitable and proper way that the reviewers in the UK understand and are able to give you a pass. Next slide, please. What is a chartered engineer? A chartered engineer works with new ideas and innovation. He's a problem solver, solving engineering problems, perhaps using existing technologies, perhaps using some new innovation, possibly. But he's technically accountable for his project or for the complex systems that he's managing. And he's also responsible for managing the risk. He or she may be responsible for the commercial leadership as well, to some extent. And what's very, very important is effective interpersonal skills. and you need to understand your responsibilities as a professional and abide by the Code of Ethics for the Energy Institute. Next slide, please. And here, partway down the page, we can see to abide by the EI Code of Conduct. So you should definitely have a look at that. If you want to apply, you should definitely have a look at that from the EI website. You need to make sure that you are working and living by that EI Code of Conduct. It's basically common sense and common good behaviour, which we all try to do anyway. When you apply as a chartered engineer, then you will apply as a chartered energy engineer, or as a chartered petroleum engineer, and possibly also as a chartered energy manager. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned that there are some degrees which are accredited, and these can be directly accredited by the Energy Institute, or if you studied outside the UK, your qualifications may still be recognised through the Washington Accord or various other databases. If you go onto the Engineering Council website, there's a tab which allows you to check whether your course on your university is accredited by them or not. If it's not, all is not lost. As I mentioned earlier, you can submit all the details of your course. And I did this for one of our members from Hong Kong who went to Jiatong University in Shanghai. It's not on any of the lists anywhere, but it's a very good course, a very highly recognized course in this part of the world. And he was able to, with a bit of guidance from myself, he was able to show the assessors in London that it was indeed as good as an accredited course. Next slide, please. Now, I just mentioned this. Most of you will go for CEng, I guess, but you might be a specialist in your field. You might not be running a project. You might not have a team working for you particularly. And it might be that you wish to go as an incorporated engineer instead. That is certainly a possibility. Next slide, please. I just mentioned this, engineering technician. You may wish to go for that possibly, but as I said, most of you I suspect will be going for CEng. But I just mention it, it does exist. And it's a possible stepping stone. It might be that if you are working in a refinery, perhaps as a technician, you might be to get this first, and then as you get promoted to supervisor and manager up the chain, and you can upgrade your professional recognition to CEng later on. Next slide, please. Chartered Energy Manager, special one, only issued by the Energy Institute. It's for those people who manage energy in an organisation and make sure that it's used efficiently. And as I mentioned earlier, I've got this qualification after working in my ex-company, and we set up an energy management program there for the whole group worldwide. Next slide, please. It's probably something that you can only apply for if you have quite a bit of practical experience. So it's not a thing that you might think, I'd just like to have this. It's something you need to be working as an energy manager or facility manager, managing a large complex, managing the energy perhaps on a campus, on a university, perhaps something like that, for a number of years, and then you could well consider this qualification. Next slide, please. Now, I've been talking mostly about engineers. I think that's probably what most people listening will be. But we also have chartered environmentalists available. And these are for people who work in sustainability or study environmental impacts and the implications of environmental sustainability plans, strategies, actions, and so on. It's a very interesting field, it's a growing field. And you may not even come from the engineering side, you may come from perhaps from geography side. So it is possible for you to get the C Environment title through the Energy Institute if you so wish, and if your work is particularly working towards energy, or thinking about energy in particular, that could be a very good qualification to get. Okay, next slide please. And the next slide, as we're coming to the end, what to do next, and where can I get help? Well, I mentioned the guidance notes. Read the notes, read them twice, read them 3 times. There's a lot in there. And then talk to your sponsors. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have some good sponsors. They've been there, done it. They can help you a lot. So talk to them, get help from them. And then also talk to people in your local branch. Talk to Alan, talk to Adlan, talk to other people in the branch that you know. They've also been there and done it and can help you. Next slide, the final slide for my section. What's your next step? Well, you may all be at different stages in your application process. So when you download this presentation, use this slide as a checklist. See where you are and then work down the next step. And if you need help, please ask. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from some of you in the future and helping you, and I'll be pleased to answer any of your questions. Back to you, Alan.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy. A lot of very important information there, and I'm sure we'll have a number of questions coming out of it. In fact, I can see 1 or 2 already coming up in the chat. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Kuhan, who will provide some insights into his journey to becoming Chartered Petroleum Engineer with the EI, and as young professionals, what your next step should be following this event. If we have time, I'd like just to introduce Dr. Adlan again, just to cover very briefly some of the key points on the EI in Malaysia. But for now, over to you, Kuhan.
Thank you, Alan. So my name is Kuhan. I work for Petronas as a senior wells engineer. And I started my chartered engineering application sometime in July last year, and that took me about 6 months, and I received my approval sometime in December as a chartered engineer and chartered petroleum engineer. So a little bit of sharing on what actually drove me towards it, or what inspired me towards applying this, is that the first thing is that there are 3 routes to apply as a professional engineer in Malaysia, so that you can carry the title of IR. And out of the 3 routes, one is you go through BEM, the second one is you go through IEM, and the third one is you go through an organization that is recognized internationally. And because I have a background in chemical engineering, that's my degree, and I have to be practicing in chemical engineering field in order to apply for Route 1 and Route 2. Hence, I decided to go for Route 3 because I work in the drilling industry. So it would be more relevant to get the chartered energy professional and then go ahead and apply to Route 3 for BEM. So a little bit about my personal sharing on how I got this through. I'm sure that Andy and the rest of them have shared on the process and procedures to apply for chartered. It's actually very simple, very straightforward. It is not as complex that you might think. And my 5 key takeaways that I've learned throughout these 6 months of application is, number 1 is make it easy. Most of the documents or the requirements are already with you. For instance, you can use your existing documents that are there. The specifics like your CV, I'm sure that you update your resume from time to time. And for those who go through a annual assessment, I'm sure you also list the projects that you will actually complete in a year. So that can be traced back for 3 years. So you just have to pick up your annual assessment for 3 years, and you have the content there as well. Third one is technical assessments. I'm sure in every organization you would have a technical assessment ruler or a ladder, which allows you to close your gaps, and that can actually be used as your CPD records. So that is also covered there. So in other words, what the documents that are required for your chartered application is already available. The only thing you need to do is that you need to start organizing. So that comes to my second point, is organizing into folders. So what I did was, we have part A and we have part B. As you can see, part A is more of a compilation process, because you need to prove to the Energy Institute that you have the experience that is required. So part A, it's more of updating your resume. It's more of collecting all your CPD for the past 3 years, setting up your, I'm sure you have your organization chart and your personal development reviews, and of course your sponsors. So sponsors, you can always find any chartered engineer which are residing in Malaysia, or anyone who is outside who is willing to assist you with the sponsor reference. And that's part A. So part A is something that you can start right away, immediately, and you can put it aside. Okay. Now part B is where comes up to my point number 3. So part B is where you have to do writing. So that requires a lot of writing, but it's not something new. It's something that you have to map out the resources and cross-reference them to some of your appraisal statements. So for instance, in the last year, you would have completed a project. Now this project is already stated in your appraisal reference. What did you achieve out of this project? Now that is what you need to be writing in your part B. So many people that I've spoken to, they say that it takes time for them to actually write their part B. That's because they tend to think outside of what they have done. If you just focus on what you have accomplished over the past few years, it actually gets easier. So that goes to my point number 4, which is go detail on the project specifics. So what the EI requires is your involvement and your role. So of course I've made quite a number of mistakes during my application, to be very honest. Once I completed my application and sent in for a review, one mistake that I did was I wrote specifics to be very generic. So it was more of the industry, the oil and gas, the drilling industry. So it was very specific. But their requirement was, what was your role? For instance, if you say that you are designing a well, what was your role in designing this well? Was it to do and select the glazing seat selection? Or was it to design the mud specifications? And when you design these mud specifications, what was the thought process involved in it? And that's what the EI would actually be looking into. And of course, the fifth step is stay inspired, because many people that I've seen, they actually started their writing, but along the way they tend to drop off because it just requires time to write. And if you know how to actually make cross-reference to your existing documents and records, you can actually get this out and over within a week, and it will be good to go. So that is a very important statement, which is stay inspired. So to summarize, my 5 points here is make it really easy. Start by collecting documents that you have in possession. Number 2 is organize it into folders. So you have your part A, attachments, and the part B is where you need to be looking in writing. Point number 3 is map out your resources and cross-reference them. So don't think outside of what you have done. Just focus on what you have accomplished in your organization and write that out in detail. Number 4 is go really detailed on your role, not the industry in general. And of course, the 5th one is to stay inspired. Now, once you have attained your chartered engineering, what's next? So the question will be is, as you can see in this slide, is you have to be registered as a graduate member of BEM. So if you have not registered as a graduate member of BEM, you can start that as your first step. while you register as an associate member with the Energy Institute. So you will have a graduate engineer recognition from BEM and also the associate member recognition from EI. Now, once you have accomplished your associate member and you have moved up to chartered status, then you go to BEM, Board of Engineers Malaysia, and you apply for your professional engineer. Now, this could look like a very straightforward process because once you have attained a professional certification from an overseas regulatory body, what you need to do is you need to just sit for the Code of Conduct Assessment. Now, this Code of Conduct Assessment is organized by BEM. And if you pass the Code of Conduct Assessment and also you pass an internal process of this certification from BEM, you will be given the abbreviation of IR. And that will also come along with your professional engineering just behind your name. So this is the 3 routes that are available, and the intention of today's presentation is so that we could focus on route number 3, which is a little bit more straightforward as compared to route number 1 and route number 2. Personally, working in the energy industry. So thank you, and I look forward to more questions. All right, thanks, Alan. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kuhan, and indeed a big thanks to all our presenters. Unfortunately, time is against us, so we're unable to go back and hear from Dr. Adlan. But if you wish to know more about the EI in Malaysia, then do give us a shout on the email, and we'll get back to you with details. Before we move into Q&A, I'd just like to highlight a very important EI project which young energy professionals should become actively involved in. Generation 2050 will provide the platform for the next generation of energy leaders to steer the global energy transition and energy mix. I'd urge all of you to get on board at this early stage and take on the challenges we all face. Our future is in your hands, so let's hear your voice. Moving on to Q&A, we'll try to fit in a few questions. We'll run slightly over time. But as I said, anything else that you can think of, do get in contact with us. So I see there's a few questions coming up on the chat, and I'd like to go back to one that I saw coming through. I think this one, Andy, you could take on. So this is from Razmi. I'm working in the petroleum upstream business. Is it okay to apply for chartered energy engineer, as I might venture to downstream or renewables in the future? Andy.
Yes, I think that's probably quite a good idea. I don't want to say anything bad about chartered petroleum engineer. If that's going to be your lifetime work, then that's definitely the title for you. But energy is very wide-ranging, as you already indicated in your question. And yes, petroleum is just one part of energy. So why not apply as a chartered energy engineer?
Okay, I hope that goes some way to answering your question. Next one is from Hamizan. I understand the focus during professional application is to develop the competencies, and CPD is required afterwards to maintain your CEng registration. Is that the case here? I think Andy once again.
Well, you should already be doing CPD. So even during your student days at university, you should be attending talks like this. You should be joining your YPN network group and joining events and starting to learn and recording your CPD even in those days. So it's not something you do only after you get CEng. No, not at all. It's something you start right at the very beginning of your career. And even if you change careers away from engineering, maybe you change to become a lawyer or something, you'll still be asked about what you've learned and what your CPD is even in other professions as well. So it's well worth starting to make records of what you've been doing.
Okay. Next question is from Kaming Chung. Hi, I'm a PhD researcher based in Hong Kong. Can I ask if the PhD research experience also counts as professional experience in the industry? Andy?
I think that would depend very much on what you've done. If you have only been working in a lab doing very specialized research, that might not be enough. I'm not sure where you're working in Hong Kong, but if you, for example, City U have got this, and one or two of the other universities, and also in Singapore, have groups that work together with industry on projects that are sponsored together with industry, or producing products that then get industrialized or commercialized, that might be a possibility. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, and one of us will be happy to help you and look at what you've been doing yourself and see what we think.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Andy, you're a very popular man today. Next question. Andy mentioned that PDR is not a CV. Hence, it must be quite descriptive and involves multiple paragraphs of text. What's the main difference between what is written in the PDR compared to the competency grid in Part B?
So the PDR is talking about what you have done from day one, charts your journey through your energy experience and the energy profession from day one up to the present day. The competency matrix takes each part of your PDR, you could say, and says, right, in that particular bit of experience, that particular period of time, that particular project, which of the competencies did I satisfy? It might be A1, it might be B3, it might be E5, and you actually write those letters down. You look at the competency matrix. I only showed you the 5 categories. And perhaps what I should have said was that each of those categories is broken down into a further series of 3, 4, 5 points. And you'll be checked against each of those 4 or 5 competency points. And so you show in your competency matrix which one of those competencies you think that you have satisfied doing that particular bit of work or experience in your career. Hope that helps.
Yep, thank you. Next one. If I am a leader or head of a project, does this count as management skills, and also is it considering the experience that I gain?
So yes, it does. It does indeed. You also need to show that you are directing the actions of some other people. So either they directly report to you or they're part of your project team. They may not directly report to you, but they may be part of your project team, and you're giving them tasks. And not just giving them tasks, but you're assessing the outcome of those tasks. And if you need to give them training yourself, or send them on training courses, or get someone else to help them, that's also something you can bring in as part of developing other people, which is one of the competencies. So yes, it can be, but you need to be working with other people and helping to develop other people.
Okay, here's an interesting one. What is the process for becoming chartered scientist, Andy?
Good question. EI currently, or at the moment, does not offer chartered scientists, I'm afraid, so I can't help you there.
Okay, moving swiftly on. What is the minimum duration needed before applying for CEng? I think this is maybe referring to work experience.
Yeah, well, it obviously depends. I would say you need 5 years. So I would say so I've met engineers at interviews who unfortunately come to an interview and they've been 27 years old, done their degree, done 4 years experience, and they show every promise of being a CEng, but we could not pass them because they had not been able to show in that short time all the competencies. They'd got most of them, and you could see that this person was going to be a super engineer in 2 or 3 more years, but they just applied a little bit too early. So as a rough rule of thumb, I would say 5 years. So for me, I did 6 years, if I remember correctly, 5 or 6 years when I did mine many, many years ago. And I got sent to Singapore, and I was managing a team of installers on site. I had people reporting to me and so on. The thing is, when you're young, you just may not get that opportunity. So you may have to wait another year or two, and you may have to talk to your boss, you know, please give me the chance to manage a few people, manage a team. So it's a variable number of years, depends on your experience.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Maybe time for 2 or 3 more questions. This one's for Kuhan. So I've got a CEng through the Energy Institute. Now my challenge is, how do I get registered as an via Route 3 and MSUA? Finding an LR to sponsor my application is quite a challenge.
Sorry, Andy. So that means, sorry, Alan, I didn't get your question just now.
Okay. I've got a CEng through the EI. Now my challenge is, how do I get registered as an IR via Route 3 in Malaysia? Finding an IR to sponsor my application is quite a challenge.
Okay, all right. So the first step is that once you get your chartered status, and you just have to prepare the set of documents that are required from the BEM. So BEM has stated the set of documents that are required. It's pretty much in details, and actually if you were to see the documents that are required from BEM, it would be almost similar to the one that the EI requests. So you can actually use the documents from EI for BEM as well. Now the second thing is that the only challenge that you would see with BEM is that you will need to find an IR who is registered with certification, with a practicing certificate in Malaysia. So for instance, for myself, my sponsor for the IR came from within the organization, but was from a different department. But usually you can also ask BEM to refer you to any IR with a practicing certificate that you could interact with. And they would actually help you out with that. And then you just have to go through with the person to be your sponsor. Now, the second thing is that I did see a question that can you please become one of my sponsor? I'll contact you accordingly if you're okay. So yes, so if you are in Petronas, or if you are in any other organizations within the area, I would be more than happy to be one of your sponsors for the chartered application.
Okay, yeah, I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Kuhan. Second but last, is it possible if someone with a different engineering academic qualification, i.e. civil engineering, can apply for EI charter status? Professional energy engineer specifically. Andy?
Yes, but you need to have been working in the energy industry. So if you're a civil engineer and you've only been working on buildings and not had anything to do with energy whatsoever, no. On the other hand, if you started as a civil engineer and you've been working on a building and you've been working on the building services and putting in energy efficient air conditioning systems and designing, I don't know, special designs and requirements in the building to make it more energy efficient, and you've been doing this for quite a number of years, most definitely yes. I hope that sort of gives you a flavour for the distinction.
Okay, next, 2 more. The term sponsor, does it always refer to someone with CEng, or can it also be someone like a site or construction manager who's non-chartered?
Sorry, what was the first part of that question?
So this is around the term sponsor. So does a sponsor, does it always have to be someone who's chartered, or can it be someone who's not?
So you need two sponsors. One could be your line manager, and he or she might not even be an engineer, but your could be your line manager could be one of your sponsors, or someone who knows you well, knows how you perform in your work. Of course, energy related work we're talking about. But if you're going for CEng, the second sponsor must be a CEng. But it doesn't have to be a CEng from the Energy Institute. It could be a CEng from one of the other institutions.
Okay, thanks. This is the last question, and I'll take this one on because it's one that's very dear to my heart. So this is from Ung, currently studying petroleum engineering, and the question is, should I start recording every experience for my PDR in order to become chartered engineer after I graduate, or even before? Definitely, you need to start recording every experience, every project you're involved with or that you lead, and compile this portfolio of evidence. For me, going the individual route later in life, I had to backtrack, and it was so painful to get all that evidence. So, as young engineers, young professionals, definitely start as early as you possibly can and gather all that evidence. It's going to set you up well for the future and your desire to become chartered within the Energy Institute. Okay, that's us run 12 minutes over time. So I'd like to bring the Q&A session to an end. And I'd like to thank once again our presenters. Sorry about the audio problems early on. I hope all of you who have attended and that will provided you with the information which you can now use to make informed decisions on how to start or continue your journey to becoming an internationally recognized chartered energy professional to the Energy Institute. Thank you very much and goodbye.